If you guys haven't shopped for a new car for over the last decade, the first thing you're going to notice when you start poking around the industry is just how expensive new cars have become. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, I had a GTI Autobahn for the week, and that car had a sticker price of over $37,000. So if you guys are an enthusiast looking to spend way less than that, what are you going to do? Well, that's precisely why this particular vehicle that's sitting next to me exists. This is a 2019 Volkswagen Jetta GLI. It essentially takes everything that we like from the GTI, its engine, its suspension, its transmissions, and grafts it onto the least expensive car in the Volkswagen lineup, the Jetta. Now, the GLI is no stranger to us here in America. Its name has been around for about 35 years. This particular one here is the 35th anniversary model. So in today's video, I'm going to show you what it's like to live with the GLI. And the one thing that I want to talk about is the fact that this car at $27,000 is one of the best performance bargains that you can buy for 2019. In today's video, we're going to find out if that's truly the case. Now, just like any other sports sedan, the fun starts when you look underneath the hood. And unlike the regular Jettas, which just make do with less than 150 horsepower, the GLI gets a significant bump in the form of a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. Now, if you guys are going to compare this car to its direct rivals, like the Honda Civic Si, the Hyundai Elantra Sport, or the Nissan Sentra Nismo, this car has significantly more power because it also has a bigger engine. Now, it's basically the same motor you get from the GTI. Previously, VW had neutered the GLI's output to preserve the hierarchy of the GTI. You get the same power now, 228 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. That's roughly 30 more ponies than what you're going to get from the competition and about 60 more foot-pounds of torque in a car that roughly weighs a little bit more than the competition. But at like 3,100 pounds, this is not a really heavy car by modern-day standards. Now, it all goes out through the front wheels through a mechanical limited slip differential, which Volkswagen calls VAQ. And it also goes out through either a standard 6-speed manual transmission like my Tester or an optional 7-speed dual clutch transmission for about $800 extra. Now, VW says you should be getting to 60 in around just under 6 seconds. Depending on the transmission, the dual clutch is the quicker option. And the GLI is actually not very thirsty considering the power output. It's rated at 25 in the city, 32 on the highway. That actually is better than the GTI sibling to this car, and it's about the same MPG that you're going to get from a lot of the competition. Not quite as fuel efficient as the Honda Civic Si, but I'd argue this has significantly more power. Now, thankfully, you don't even have to put premium gas in this thing. It still will just run happily on regular, but you may lose a little bit of ponies in the process. But overall, it's what makes the GLI a very attractive option, especially if you're looking to spend well under $30,000. Now, when you're talking sporty sedans, design is also a really important aspect for a lot of shoppers. You can see, unlike the regular Jetta, the GLI really differentiates itself when you look at the front fascia. Obviously, the biggest change is the grille. It's got a new, unique finish to it, and you have this red line that kind of cuts across the middle. It intersects with the Volkswagen emblem. That actually houses a radar sensor for the front assist. This car has standard forward collision alert, even on the base trim. Now, you can also see this car has LED headlights. You have an LED low and high beam. You have an LED daytime running light, just an incandescent turn signal over here, and then you get no fog lights, which is surprising because the regular Jetta offers fog lights along with the GTI. Instead, Volkswagen decided to replace the fog light area here with this fake air intake dam, which I think looks okay, although I would have preferred to have them preserve the fog lights because it would have completed the look of this car a little bit more. A nice set of wheels and tires are also very important when you're talking about a sporty sedan. As you can see, the GLI makes do with these really attractive set of 18-inch wheels. These wheels in particular are unique to the 35th anniversary models. If you guys go for the regular S or the Autobahn, you'll kind of have a directional finished wheel that was very similar to that last GTI Autobahn that I tested. These wheels for me are the winner in terms of the design. I don't know if I particularly like the red lip, although they look good with this tornado red exterior color that my Tester is painted. And as you can see, the brakes, these are the same 13.5-inch rotors that you get in the Volkswagen Golf R. They aren't actually Brembo brakes, but they are high-performance brakes and whatnot. The suspension on this car also has been retuned. It's the stiffer one that you get from the GTI. And unlike the regular Jettas, which have a semi-independent twist beam, this car actually has a full independent setup to go along with that limited slip differential. You know, I don't particularly always love red cars, but when they have black accents like this black roof, the black spoiler, the black mirrors that you get with the 35th anniversary model, I have to say, I am really impressed with the overall design of this car. It turned a lot of heads, and I think it also looks classy, it looks elegant, it looks mature. Now, the one thing I want to talk about, it's got these full LED taillights with an LED turn signal, which is funny because the turn signal in the front is actually an incandescent. Where's the consistency, Volkswagen? It would have been nice to have that. The whole rear end of this car is very Audi-like. It just basically looks like an Audi A4 with just a Volkswagen badge. It's a very clean, inoffensive design. The one thing I am noticing, it's missing parking sensors. You get that on a GTI, for example, and it's got a very tasteful dual exhaust setup, which is an actual real exhaust, unlike the fake exhaust you get in a lot of other Volkswagen and Audi products. This is a GLI, so let's hear what that engine sounds like. And just like the GTI, the engine has a nice muted, understated kind of growl, although it does have a sound imposer technology on the interior. So we'll talk about the differences in sound when we start driving the thing. Now, this is a sedan, so you guys have to see what the trunk capacity is like. VW says you get around 14 cubic feet of space. You can also fold the seats down 60/40, and you also have a spare tire underneath here, which a lot of performance sedans are actually getting rid of, so you don't have to deal with a fix-a-flat kit. So how does Volkswagen manage to keep this car for under $30,000 for something that's reasonably well equipped? Well, you may be thinking they're probably cutting corners in the interior, right? Well, the new Jetta, I'm happy to say, has an interior that is much improved over the old Mark 6 generation. I mean, I've shown you guys this interior in my previous GLI video, so be sure to click on the link in the description if you guys want to watch the video on that car that I uploaded earlier this year. That has basically the first person look where I talk about everything. So I'm going to briefly touch base on the differences on the inside for this 35th anniversary model because it is $3,000 cheaper than the Autobahn that I showed in my last video. Now overall, let's first start with shutting the door. What does that sound like? It actually doesn't sound quite as good as the last GTI that I had 2 weeks ago. I will say that it doesn't sound quite as solid, so it's surprising to me considering this car is the same MQB platform. Now the rest of this interior, you can see the seats. I'll start with these. These are a cloth seat. They're a Titan black cloth. So if you guys are looking for that lovely plaid cloth seats in the GTI, sorry, it's just not available in this car. Your other option, if you guys go for the Autobahn, is the Titan black leather. You also have just a 6-way manual adjustment for the seats. The Autobahn model will have the 6-way power with the lumbar support, with the memory function, and those seats were heated and cooled. These are only heated seats, and I will say, for somebody that's 5'7", I'm a little disappointed that it doesn't actually allow me to adjust the angle of the seat over here on the lower thigh support. It's a little too high for me, so make sure you try the seats out on your own. If you pull this lever, you can see you can crank the seat a little bit up, but then if I started cranking the seat up where this part here matched the level of the seat bottom cushion on the back part, it just had me sitting up too high and my head started to hit the roof. But another thing you're going to notice, the steering wheel is the same steering wheel you get from the GTI. Aside from the GLI badge, it looks identical. It's a tilt telescoping wheel, and basically the biggest difference with the interior, unlike the Autobahn model, you don't have the digital cockpit display. You just kind of have this standard looking display and the Discover Media Infotainment System. This is only a 6.5-inch screen, which is fine because it has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. It is a little bit small looking versus the 8-inch screen, but I will say I was annoyed with the fact that this car does not include satellite radio, so you're basically stuck with AM or FM radio, not even an HD radio, and basically whatever music setup you have on your phone. But other than that, the interior for this 6-speed manual model is very nice. You have the same aluminum pedals. The clutch itself, we'll talk about that later on in the test drive. And the seats, they aren't any more aggressively bolstered versus like a standard Jetta SEL. Volkswagen says they didn't want the seats to be more aggressively bolstered because they found that the audience of this particular car didn't want to have to deal with a seat, cushion that kind of got in the way as you're trying to get in and out of the vehicle. Now, because the GLI is a bigger car versus the GTI, you also get more space when you look at the back seat. Just all you basically need to know, instead of 35 inches of legroom like you get in the GTI, VW says you have 37 inches of legroom, so you got about 2 more inches of legroom. I'm 5'7", and as you can see, I am very comfortable, so you can easily put adults back here as long as they're not, over 6 feet tall. There is a hump in the center here that will intrude on the middle passenger, and there's no rear seat air vents, and you also have very cheap, scratchy material back here, and then just one mat pocket. So there is a little bit of cost cutting, but this car does offer the bigger back seat, which could be a really important deciding factor for some of you. So moving on to the driving portion of the GLI, you guys really liked it when I did the night drive. So it's a little after 8 o'clock here in the DC area. So this is probably the perfect time when it comes to the light. The first thing I want to show you guys, I have to do it while we're stopped, the multiple color options that you can change this ambient lighting to. I have it set to red right now. VW says there's 10 different color options. All you have to do is just go into the screen over here. Unfortunately, it gets blurred out when you're driving. So I'm going to see if I can try to make this a bright color. I also noticed it changes the actual ambient lighting color in the screen, which is cool. But remember, this is the smaller 6.5-inch screen. So let's have it on the, I like this teal color. So we'll put it on the teal color there. And of course, if you'd like, VW will let you change like all the different lighting colors, like from the front console, the footwell, and whatnot. So we'll just kind of leave it at that when we go on to the driving portion of this video. Now, the last time I drove the GLI, I was in North Carolina on Tail of the Dragon, which is an amazing road if you guys are looking for some twisty roads in the eastern part of the country. Now the GLI, or at least this particular one, is the 35th anniversary model, so it has the adaptive dampers, which surprisingly are not available on any other trim of the GLI. You think they'd have it on the Autobahn. My guess is for the 2020 model year, when this trim level phases out, because it's no longer the 35th anniversary, Volkswagen will put the adaptive dampers in the Autobahn model, which means I've got, you know, several different additional drive modes as opposed to the other ones. I'll leave it in sport mode for demonstration purposes. As you guys see, this one here is the 6-speed manual. Now in sport mode, it has the active sound Symposer technology turned on. So you hear it, it's pretty loud. If I go to normal, you can hear that noise, the deeper burble is gone. I'll let you guys hear what it sounds like from the outside of the car back into sport mode really quick. And as you guys heard from the outside of the car, the exhaust doesn't really sound like anything. Instead, what you hear is all the noise on the inside of this car. And I have to say, it does sound good. Instead of the previous generation where it sounded like a 5-cylinder, this just sounds like it has an intake on the car already. So most people I find will probably like the noise, but some of you will probably prefer a little bit more exhaust noise. I think Volkswagen needs to do something about the exhaust noise. Now, even in sport setting here, this car's, you know, ride quality is not harsh. It's a very comfortable ride. I would say that it's a little bit quieter and softer than the last Civic Si that I drove. It strikes a really nice balance between the ride and the handling. The visibility in the GLI is also very good. You can see everything really well. The hood's nice and low, so you can see. I like the interior lighting in here as well. The gauges, remember, this one doesn't have the digital cockpit display, so you just have, you know, these red accented gauges with this little 3.5-inch monochromatic screen in the center. Honestly, these gauges look like they were pulled off of the previous generation GLI, and they stuck on some red accents on it. So they're not really my favorite. I highly recommend going for the Autobahn again to get the digital cockpit display, because I think it's worth it, along with the larger 8-inch display over here, because when you go to like selection, for example, there's no performance mode where it shows the boost gauge and whatnot, and your G meter, which I know some of you may think it's a gimmick, but it's a nice little feature to have. Now, let's go over to the comfort mode here, and you can hear immediately it gets quieter. The steering also gets lighter. Putting the vehicle into 6th gear, you can see at 60 miles an hour, it's revving below 2,000 RPM. So they've geared this for fuel efficiency, which is why I've been able to get, you know, well over 35 miles to the gallon on the highway with this thing. It'll get very good gas mileage if you guys drive this thing very conservatively, which some of you may do it, but it's a GLI, so put it back into sport mode over here. Now, I had a chance to drive a dual-clutch Golf GTI for a week, and I have to say, you know, you can't go wrong with either transmission. Obviously, you know, if you're purists, you're going to want the stick shift. But if you guys, you know, don't deal with traffic all the time and you want the quicker 0 to 60, there's nothing wrong with going with that dual clutch. It also offers a launch control, which this doesn't really have. I will say that VW's manual, the clutch, the engagement point is kind of toward the end of the travel, and I wish they offered active rev matching. But listen to that. That sounds really good. I have to say, I do like the sound of this, and it pulls hard. This is a fast-feeling car. It will smoke any Civic Si stock that you just drove, or the Elantra Sport, or I haven't driven the Sentra Nismo, but I did drive a Sentra Turbo SR with a manual a couple of years ago when that first came out, and I wasn't really too impressed with it. But yeah, Jettas before, they used to feel like they were behind GTIs, but this car now feels like it's just like a GTI sedan, and that's why I think a lot of people are going to be surprised when you first take this for a drive. Let's take this off-ramp here. We'll go a little bit quicker to see how this thing handles. The headlights don't swivel, they're not adaptive. You can't get that on GLI like you can on the GTI, but I will say the LED headlights are nice. I would prefer to see fog lights on this car. I think fog lights would be nice to kind of level out the lighting and give us a little bit more lighting at the lower end. This is a fun car. I forget that I'm driving a Jetta because, you know, the seats don't hug you as much as the GTI, so I am noticing I'm falling out of the seats a little bit more. But look at this thing. There could easily be a Jetta R. Like with 300 horsepower and all-wheel drive. I think there's a market for the Jetta R. This is one fabulous driving car. Let's try a quick little 0 to 60 here. Ooh, wheel hop for days. Okay. Now the engine itself doesn't really have much in terms of turbo lag, but I am noticing the power tapers off right around the 5,800, just below 6 grand. Now you can push it to over 6 grand. Redline's around 6,500, 6,600, and it will pull. It's just, there's not really much power left at that point, so I don't know if you'd want to. Now, I did pleasantly like how there is no torque steer in this car. That's something that I was afraid you'd experience, but it does have that limited slip diff, but like other front-wheel drive cars, the Type R will do it as well. You will get some wheel hop. It's not really designed to do aggressive clutch dumps, which if you own this car, you probably will not do it anyways. But overall, you know, I am very pleasantly surprised. I mean, I like this thing a lot when I drove it on Tail of the Dragon, but just kind of tootling around, you know, my local DC area here, just driving this thing, it is a great commuter car, you know, for a lot of enthusiasts who don't want to break the bank. I mean, $27,000 for this car. I mean, I wish that it had the better options from the Autobahn, which honestly, the Autobahn is 3 grand more. 30 grand for something like this, it does make a lot of sense. Now, granted, there are a couple of things like I said, the swiveling, adaptive headlights are not available that you get on the GTI. You can't get factory embedded navigation, which doesn't really matter for most people. Most people just use their phones. But, you know, for a sports sedan like this, that's priced like this, it is very tempting. Now, granted, you guys could compare this to something larger, like a Mazda 6 with the turbo engine, a Honda Accord Sport, but I'd argue that the Accord Sport, to make it comparable, you need to get the 2-liter Sport with a manual, and that will lack a limited slip differential, and that car is around $30,000. So it's still about $5,000 more expensive than a base GLI. And, you know, the 0 to 60 of the Sport should be similar, because I've seen this car at around 5.8 seconds for this manual, 5.6 with the DSG. So this is quick. This is about a second quicker than a current generation Honda Civic Si, and you're going to notice that extra 30 horsepower and 60 pound-feet of torque right away. But this car definitely has a much, you know, a premium feel to it. Aside from the smaller screen here and the non-digital display, if you're okay with that, there is a lot to like about the Jetta GLI as your daily driver. So if you guys are truly looking for a fun-to-drive daily driver that won't break the bank, the GLI is definitely a special car. It's one of the most special cars that I'm seeing introduced for the 2019 model year for several reasons. Obviously, some of you may just think it looks like a slightly sportier Jetta on the outside, but as you guys saw from the test drive portion, this is a special driving car because it's significantly faster than most of the competition. It's got steering that feels really communicative. It's really quick ratio. It has a ride quality that won't beat you up on the everyday commute, and the interior is one of the most spacious, most comfortable. And although this particular 35th anniversary model is kind of missing the better 8-inch infotainment system, the digital cockpit display, the panoramic sunroof, I think that Volkswagen has thrown in a lot to offer for this car, especially when you look at the starting price at just under $26,000 at $25,995 for the base S model, of course, plus the destination charge. This 35th anniversary model is about $1,000 more, and then you add the destination, you're at $27,890. I mean, for that price, This is a little bit more expensive than something like a Honda Civic Si, but I'd argue with an extra 30 horsepower and 60 pound-feet of torque, this is the better buy. Now, compared to the GTI sibling, this car is about $1,700 less expensive, which is definitely great because you get basically the same power, you get more interior space, you have similar handling and driving characteristics, although some of you will miss the hatch versatility, but then some of you will also like the look of this. I think it's definitely carving out an interesting niche because this is more special feeling than something like the competitors I mentioned, the SI, the Sentra Nismo, and the Hyundai Elantra Sport, but it's not quite as performance-oriented as the Subaru WRX, which has all-wheel drive, which is also about $1,200 more expensive than this car. It gets a little bit worse gas mileage, and it also is a little bit more harsh. It'll beat you up on its daily commute. So I think that Volkswagen has definitely offered something that's really enticing, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of buyers who are looking for a GTI end up choosing this because of the significant price difference. But with all that said, after living with the GLI for a week, it's time to give this car an RPM rating. Now, starting with real-world usage. This is a sedan. Now, I'm going to compare it to a lot of the other sport compacts that I have on the list so far. I will rate it 1 less point versus the GTI at 7 points, simply because with the sedan, it doesn't give you quite the same versatility versus the GTI, which I gave a 7 out of 10 points. Moving on to the E for efficiency, I'm going to give this car a 7 out of 10 points simply because it got very good gas mileage in my week's worth of testing. I easily got about 24 mpg in the city, driving enthusiastically, and on the highway, I was able to get this thing up to 35 mpg. Factor in the fact that this only uses regular gas if you guys wanted to, and this thing is a very inexpensive car to run and drive on a daily basis. Now, moving on to the desirability factor. This is a GLI, which doesn't really look all that special from times on the outside. You kind of have to squint at it. You have to know VW performance products. So I'm going to give this car a 6 out of 10 points for desirability, which is kind of similar to what I gave it for the GTI because even though this is a newer model, it's a little bit more under the radar. But that might be a good thing for some of you. This doesn't have the same kind of, wow, gotta have it factor as something like the Civic Type R, which I rate the highest in this segment. Now, moving on to longevity. This is a Volkswagen product, and I know a lot of you out there have voiced your opinion about Volkswagens and their really bad quality. Now, I have to say, there are people out there that I know who own a Volkswagen that actually have really good luck with them. Now, I had a 2010 GTI that I had for a year that I bought used back in 2012, and it didn't give me any problems with it aside from the occasional little warning light that the tag lights were busted or the sunroof didn't want to close at one point, but I didn't actually have to take it to the dealer. I just kind of restarted the car and it will reset itself. Keep in mind that VW offers one of the best warranties in the industry at 6 years, 72,000 miles for 2019. That's a comprehensive warranty, but that warranty is dropping to 4 years, 50K for the 2020 model year. So VW kind of had that higher warranty out there, but just keep in mind, even at 4 year 50, this is a better warranty than what you're going to get than versus the American and Japanese competitors, but it is no longer better than Hyundai if you guys would decide to buy one of these for the 2020 model year. Now, moving on to the I in innovation, I wanted to give this car a higher score for the innovation factor versus a GTI, and I did. This car is rated at 7 out of 10 points for innovation, simply because the interior has more technology versus the GTI, but it's not necessarily the GTI's fault because it's an older car. This car offers things like cooled seats, the digital cockpit display, the 8-inch touchscreen, a panoramic sunroof, the memory seats. You can't get cooled seats, the digital cockpit display, or the memory seats on a GTI, which is why I gave this car a slightly higher rating at 7 out of 10 points. Now, moving on to the N for need for speed. Now, obviously, this is a GLI. It is definitely a fast driving car, especially if you guys are coming from just a regular Jetta. I'm going to give this car a 6 out of 10 points for need for speed, simply because it's not quite as fast as something like the Civic Type R, but it has similar performance as you get from a current generation GTI, which I also gave a 6 out of 10 points. And of course, last but not least, the E for expense. I'm going to give the GLI a much higher score than the GTI because this car starts at under $26,000. I'll give this an 8 out of 10 points for expense. This one here at $27,500, including the destination, it represents one of the best values you can get in a sports sedan, especially considering the fact that this has almost 230 horsepower and it's that fun to drive. Add it all up and you get around 46 out of 70 points, which does rate this thing about 2 points higher versus a GTI that I also had an Autobahn model. And it really comes down to the fact that this car is a much better value. So that increase in the expense score that I'm giving it is also giving it a bump. But I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on this 2019 Volkswagen Jetta GLI. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook. And as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.